With the Vikings on the board at pick 23, with Will Levis right in front of them, they decide no thank you. They take a wide receiver, Jordan Addison, out of USC. Let's talk about it on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You like that on 3, 1, 2, 3, you like it!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I am your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. And a special shout out to my hashtag everydayers. Sound off if you can. You can find the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts, including YouTube even, or at whatever audio platform. You can even watch it on Amazon Fire or Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. If you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your own football franchise, then this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on app stores. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDON in all caps in the game. We did it, folks. We made it to the draft. Thank you all so much for those of you who stuck around for all of the, I think, 3 hours that I was live on the Locked On Vikings YouTube channel. That was so much fun. There was so many of you astounded by that. Yeah, great time. The Vikings select Jordan Addison out of USC. So what we're going to do today is first, we should clear the air about the elephant in the room, which is they didn't take Levis. I think that's a lot of what people are wondering is what about Levis? But I do want to spend a good majority of the show as well talking about Addison, and maybe we'll even get to the impact that Addison has on the offense another time soon. I definitely want to dedicate at least like a full show to him, but I'll give you the skinny real quick, and also a little bit about what we can expect tomorrow. But first, I guess the way that a lot of, I think, media has been approaching this has been with like this confusion about why they didn't take Will Levis. So let me try my best to explain it because it makes perfect sense to me. Like when they were on the clock and it was 23, I kind of thought, well, maybe it could be Levis. But it felt unlikely to me, and then they didn't take him, and then I kind of look at the response, and everybody's like, what? They didn't take Levis? I was sure they would take Levis, and I wonder how people are that sure. But here's, I guess, my thought process, and maybe it can help clarify for people, or at least provide a counter theory. They don't think Levis is very good. Okay, the end of explanation. It's got to be that. I mean, it's not like Kevin O'Connell doesn't know about the guy. He's dear friends with Liam Cohen, who was Levis's offensive coordinator at Kentucky before his final year. He has a lot of connections on that Kentucky staff. I think they brought him in for a visit. Of course, they've scouted him. They've done the homework on him. They got the book on him. They decided they didn't want him, and I think there is a good chunk of people, and I see people in like my YouTube comments and stuff too, that I think are still thinking this way, where you go, well, you got to get a quarterback. You didn't extend Cousins. Now you don't have a quarterback. What are you going to do at quarterback? You're going to go with more Cousins? And some people absolutely hate that idea. Whatever you think about Cousins and where they're at with that, you shouldn't want them to take a quarterback just because it says quarterback. You should want them to take a guy that they feel good about. When you are a GM in the NFL, this is just the reality of the situation. This is not the kind of thing you have to contend with when you're playing Ultimate Football GM, but it is the kind of thing you have to contend with when you're an actual NFL GM. You get fired, dog. You could lose that job. And if you look at the tenures of GMs across the league, especially the shorter tenures, the ones that are seen as failures, the Ryan Pace tenures, not the Rick Spielman. He was in the building for like 18 years or whatever. He was the GM for 20 or for 10 years. No, I'm talking about the guys that are kind of in and out. And if you look at that, you will see a lot of them took the wrong quarterback. And then they had to, have Mitch Trubisky at the helm for too many years of their tenure, and it threw everything into whack. Don't do that. Now, we can argue about whether or not Will Levis is or isn't the wrong quarterback. And if your argument is, man, Levis is a starting quality quarterback and he's going to be good in this league, they're stupid to pass on him, he's going to be a dude. I respect that. And I don't agree, but I respect that. But if your argument is they need a quarterback, they didn't take the best quarterback who many people thought should have been a top 10 pick, but they picked the wrong position. If that's the nature of the argument and not necessarily like an evaluation of Levis, but just that, hey, they need a quarterback, they should have picked a quarterback. Why are they looking at another position and acting like it's more important than quarterback? I don't have as much patience for that. I don't think that is the right way to think about this. They didn't think Will Levis was a franchise quarterback or wasn't their franchise quarterback. Now, Will Levis is still on the board as of this recording. He didn't get picked in all of day one, so maybe he falls far enough and maybe they trade up or something like that. Who knows? But I wanted to start with that. It's truly that simple. They just don't think he's as good as you think that they are. And you are 1,000,000% allowed to disagree with them there. Just because they are an NFL team does not mean that they are infallible, and it doesn't mean that you can't go in and say, I would have done something different. Personally, I too would have done something. I would have taken Porter. I wish they could have traded back. I don't know what deals they did or didn't say yes to. So, I don't know what they were offered or whatever. So it's hard for me to truly judge. I wish they could have traded back. But just given who was on the board at the time, I would have taken Joey Porter, who also fell all the way out of the first round. So I'm excited to see where he ends up. He was the top player on my board when they picked. Addison was the second one though, so not that mad, right? But there, I feel confident in having that disagreement with the team. But it is about, I just thought a different player was better because that's my evaluation, and I'm going to stick with that because it's mine. Don't take a quarterback just because it's a quarterback. Don't take the guy who's there just because he's there. That's how you end up with Mitch Trubisky's. Well, and they were just, the Bears traded up for Trubisky. They were in love with Trubisky, and then they were just wrong, and you live and die by it. But that's sort of the cautionary tale. Maybe a better one would be like Deshaun Kaiser. That's a better option. He was there. They picked him because he was there, and it didn't work out. If it were Anthony Richardson falling, I think the Vikings eventually probably wouldn't have let him get past 6 or 7. But Levis ain't that guy. If it were somebody else, maybe not Levis. That's their eval. And hey, if Levis gets picked somewhere and he turns into an all-pro, then yep, okay. That's a miss on the scouting department. We didn't have that one right. Fair enough. But I'm not going to disparage a team for having their take on a guy and sticking to it and not just taking him because he's there, especially not in the first round with a quarterback. So let's talk about the guy they actually took, all right? Enough of this hand-wringing about Will Levis. Jordan Addison's pretty sweet, and I am going to tell you everything that I've got about him, which I hope to expand in the coming days. But first, if you think you can do better, why don't you go download Ultimate Football GM onto your phone and show me that franchise with all of those Lombardis. It is a football team manager simulator kind of game on your phone. You have to hire the right staff, do draft, do contracts, manage the salary cap, all of that stuff, and eventually try to win a whole bunch of Super Bowls. I've seen people go, so you could go 100 years into a football franchise and see if you can't win a whole bunch of Super Bowls in a row. You can trade picks into next year. You can tank until you have an entire first round and then start to build your dynasty from there. You can do all kinds of stuff with Ultimate Pro Football GM. And you can get a 100% free boost to your franchise by using promo code LOCKEDON in all caps at the game store. That's promo code LOCKEDON in all caps. And by the way, here's something cool. It's actually not a game that you necessarily need Wi-Fi to play. You have all kinds of other in-app play, so it's a good one for like an airplane or something too. Once again, go to ultimate-gm.com or just look up Ultimate Football GM on the app stores. That is ultimate-gm.com. betterhelp-gm.com, promo code locked on in all caps in the game store to get that 100% free boost. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, and a shout out to my hashtag everydayers. The Locked On NFL scouting guys are still covering day 2 a little bit, so why don't you go check that out, and there'll be some live things there, I believe, for day 2, if I'm not looking at old information here. But either way, go check those guys out as well. I will also have a show. Usually I don't have a show on Saturday morning. I will have a show on Saturday morning. I will have a show on Sunday morning. I'll have a show on Monday morning, recapping all of the different things that the Vikings did. There's going to be a lot of new Vikings to get to know, so we'll get to know them. And let's get to know Jordan Addison, baby. USC wide receiver, Biletnikoff winner in 2021 as a member of Pitt, with Kenny Pickett throwing to him. Transfers to USC. I think that was an NIL thing, if I'm not mistaken. So beautiful. Chase that bag. We love to see it. And tore it up for USC. I had Jordan Addison, and I talked about him on my wide receiver breakdown thing, so you can go check my receipts on that. I had him as wide receiver 2. The only wide receiver I liked better was Smith and Jigba. I was close with Zay Flowers, but ended up just eking Addison over Flowers a little bit, and everybody else on the board I thought was a tier below. With Addison, the thing you need to know about him is that he will go off of his routes alignment a lot with a very natural instinct and feel to it. And he'll really stress corners that way. That's the best thing that I think he does. And it's kind of his favorite pitch. He kind of approaches every route that way. When you're a corner, the most disciplined corners won't react until the receiver is like outside of their frame one way or another. And Addison knows and attacks this. And it takes a particular athleticism to get outside of that corner's frame and essentially force them to turn their hips. This works a lot better with tape, which is not conducive to an audio podcast, but I do show it on my Patreon page, patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. I made the Jordan Addison post that I posted back in March free, so you can see my breakdown there, and I'm probably going to do another one now that they picked him that's a little bit more in-depth. And honestly, I think I learned a lot about wide receiver since March 27th, which I know sounds crazy, like it's only been a month, but I've learned a lot this month, and I kind of just want to revisit it. If you can get outside the frame of that corner has to move his hips. There's no that, like, if he doesn't move his hips, you're busting the coverage. And then that gives you a blind spot because now he has turned around, so you can move right back into your route alignment and either hit the burners, break the route off, and you're in his blind spot. And the way he times this is very intentional. He is small. He's 5'11", I think 175 or something like that. And he will get bumped around physically a lot. And that's probably the most common weakness that you will see, is that he just is going to get bumped around a little bit on routes. And he has to go around guys. But he has that athleticism to get way outside of his path, right? He just goes way out of his way and can come back if that's what it takes to set guys up. The problem that Jordan Addison solves is, if you remember end-ish of the 2022 season, this last season, Justin Jefferson was getting bracketed all the time. And remember, we had all that talk about cover 2 and cover 2 beaters. And you could kind of see defenses realizing that they could sort of key on Justin Jefferson. And as long as they could not lose the game to the tight end on his own, they were going to be okay. And we actually saw the Giants really flirt with this, right? They really, in the playoffs, they really sold out for Jefferson. TJ Hawkinson had a 100-yard game. Jefferson got limited a little bit, and there wasn't enough of a way. And the Vikings offense had a pretty good game there through Hawkinson, but it ultimately fell short. And I think that's because, that last play, that last couple of plays in that playoff game, I actually think turn into pretty good examples of this problem, where You double Jefferson, and there's nowhere else to go. There are common cover one answers to this kind of thing. One double jersey number is cover one deep defender, 5 guys man to man across the board, 4 pass rushers. For those with all your fingers, that's 10 players. The last remaining player double covers whoever's in the coverage call. So one double 18 is man coverage across the board, 1 deep defender, and then somebody double covers Justin Jefferson. So you have 2 people on Justin Jefferson and 1 person across the board. The Vikings could not punish that coverage nearly well enough. You got man-to-man, one-on-one everywhere else. And KJ Osborne got separation sometimes, but not enough. TJ Hawkinson got separation, but he's a tight end at the end of the day. Jordan Addison can punish that. You put him on the outside of the formation, on the other side is of Justin Jefferson, and say, what are you going to do about this guy, though? He's not going to become, the team leader in receptions or anything. That's still going to be JJ. But I think it's going to help take some of that pressure off of JJ in the, the way that anytime you feel like you've gotten a complimentary piece, it does. But it's because he can win one-on-one, and I don't think teams are going to start putting a safety on him too, unless he really breaks out. I think he's going to get those one-on-one opportunities, and I think he can beat them and really punish the stuff that teams do to try to clamp down on Justin Jefferson. Other things, I guess, he's definitely smart enough. I mean, he's only 21. He plays like he's a 4-year starter. And that's really exciting. Like, this is truly a polished player. This is not a guy that needs a year by any stretch of the imagination. He can come in. I think he can compete immediately with KJ Osborne. And I would expect that he eventually eclipses KJ Osborne, and KJ is your kind of wide receiver 3, which would be pretty fun. But you kind of have that duo of 2. Kwesi talked about inside-outside flexibility. Some people want to say he's only a slot because he's small. I think that is... I'll go with overly simplistic. And that's also, I think, an old stereotype. Jordan Addison can absolutely play outside, and played outside and inside for USC and Pitt a lot to great success. I don't really think there's anything on his tape that tells me that there's an issue with him being outside. I got to take an L here, everyone. I did not think Addison was really going to be that interesting to the Vikings because he doesn't block. Not only does he fail when his job, so when you're a slot, when you line up on the inside and it's a run play, a lot of times your job is to go find the safety and keep him from getting into the box, and he just doesn't do that. Now maybe that wasn't actually USC's offense or whatever, but that his ability to do that left a lot to be desired, and sometimes the want to left a lot to be desired. Sometimes wide receivers get a little dogged on run plays, but when it was time to really actually go make a block and you're part of this run play and it's truly an assignment and not just kind of a, hey, just go find the DB. He also, I mean, that's when the size comes to play. He wasn't that adept at spacing and positioning himself at that. And the conclusion I came away with was okay, this dude just doesn't block. You just don't have him in your run plays then. Now, if I see in camp that he is getting into blocking assignments and he's going all in on them, and he's doing well at them, and then that's just, oh, okay, that was just a USC offense thing that I'm just misinterpreting as a trait, then that's going to be really hype. That would be a really, really cool outcome. But as a guy with that size, you just don't expect a lot from blocking anyways. So in the run game, yeah, I don't see a lot of utility, but also he's not a wide blocker. He's a wide receiver, and we care about the routes, right? The other thing I'll say is there's not a lot of elusiveness. He's not breaking a bunch of tackles. He's not like a yak guy. But USC ran a bunch of tunnel screens to him. You can still give him underneath stuff, but he's not going to be that dynamic, make a bunch of plays underneath in space and stuff. Just give him the ball and let him run upfield and, find a lane. It's functional. But what I really want people to focus on with Addison is that the way he runs routes is very, very difficult for corners. He wants to take you to deep water no matter what it takes, and he can get back on his alignment. That's really, really important. That he can, release to the inside of you, then get back onto the hash where he's supposed to be. And he will be where the quarterback expects him to be. And there is a level of he understands the coverage that he's seeing and how to run a route against that coverage and say, hey, I know that you're in mod against me, which means if I, lean a little further to the outside, you're going to react differently than if you were just in pure man. And maybe if you're if this is a cover 3 look, you're going to be a little bit quicker to turn your hips than if it's a cover 2 look, then you're going to pass me off or something like that. Like, he knows what he's going against. And I love that. I love seeing that sort of savvy, especially from somebody who is 20 at the time he was playing these. He turned 21 since the end of his last year, if I remember. This rocks. I'm super excited about Jordan. You might not hear it in my voice because I'm like very tired, but this rocks. Jordan Addison's good. I, again, would have preferred to trade down, would have preferred, the big blockbuster. We're talking about Anthony Richardson and all that. That would have been so much fun. But save that, barring that, Jordan Addison is one of my favorite players that could have fallen to the Vikings. I definitely thought he should have gone at 15. I was worried this dude was going to be a Packer at like 13, honestly. I think they could have taken him at 13, and that would have been okay. Honestly, perfectly honestly, I'm looking at the drafts that the Bears had and the Lions had and the Packers had. That's 4 picks. I'm taking Addison over all 4 of those guys right now. And he was the last one selected. So I'm very happy with that. What we do tomorrow, or I guess today, because you're probably listening to this in the morning, what we do, well, it is the morning for me, let me tell you. What we do on day 2 is a better way to put that, is a different thing entirely. You know what else is a different thing entirely? Built is a different thing than what your taste buds think it is. Nailed it. Built is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. It's absolutely delicious. It has been so clutch for me. I've been trying to be good, but then I get stupid cravings and, I'll have a low calorie meal and then still be hungry and still need to knock something back and feel like I treated myself because I have no discipline at all. And that is where Built Bar can actually help me out. They're healthy. They taste amazing. Made with collagen protein, 17 grams of protein in one of these. It is a protein bar, but 4 grams of sugar, only 130 calories, but covered in 100% chocolate. Tastes absolutely delicious in flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream, dessert flavors, not sadness chalk with a little bit of cocoa powder. No, this is cookies and cream. This is good stuff. And you can, of course, go to Built.com, get it delivered directly to your door. But if you don't want to wait, you can actually go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club. And you can still, of course, get specialty flavors at Built.com. And sometimes they just drop a specialty flavor limited edition. So go back to the website sometimes and see if you stumble upon a great deal or something really fun. Once again, that is Built.com. You can thank me later. All right, to put a bow on this Locked On Vikings episode, I just want to talk about what is still on the board and where we're at for round 3. So they're sitting at pick 87 now. They do not pick in the second round as it stands, but we got a few things that we're watching. We're definitely on player trade watch. Dalvin Cook, big time trade watch. That's the guy on the trade block. We'll see if there's any suitors. I don't know. We'll be on trade watch for him on day 3 as well if he doesn't get traded day 2. I don't know if he nets a day 2 pick on his own, but he might help in a trade up or be part of a package in a greater trade down or something like that. That is something to watch. Zadarius Smith, I suppose, is also a trade watch, although it's all indications right now are that they're going to try to get a contract thing worked out with him after the draft. Danielle Hunter, not very much on trade watch for me at all. I've just explained this before, but because of the dead cap acceleration that would come with his contract, his contract is actually not legal to trade right now. They cannot trade Danielle Hunter on his own and process it. They would have to do a corresponding cap clearing move or something like that, which I don't think I see much of that happening, like in the draft war room. Or the trade would have to be like Dalvin Cook and Danielle Hunter at the same time, which it's hard to imagine what kind of day 2 trade requires 2 players to get done. So I don't see that happening. If some other cap clearing thing happens, like before day 2 kicks off, that might be an indicator, but we are not there right now. And like Daniil Hunter for a second round pick, the league will not process that. They will call Kwesi and say, you can't do that. Trade void doesn't happen. Until the salary cap is resolved there, which I don't really see it. What they need for day 2, we're big on corner watch. So corners available. Joey Porter Jr. is still on the board. He's probably the top corner on the board, probably the top player on the board, if I'm being honest. Cam Smith, big fan of him. I like Clark Phillips and DJ Turner next. There's also Julius Brents and Jacorian Bennett. I didn't watch either of those guys. I am aware of them, but I don't have many opinions on them. But those sound like they'll be day 2 guys. Keely Ringo from Georgia is also an interesting one. A lot of people thought earlier in the process he would be a first round pick. I never saw it, but now that we're in day 2, he's a much more palatable guy. Very interesting, fast 40, third round corner. See if you can't develop some stuff from him. Some sleeper type corners, Rajon Wright, Terrell Smith, Minnesota, the Gopher, Riley Moss. I could see some of those guys going. I've got 4th round grades on those guys, but wouldn't be super shocked to see them go day 2. There's also a defensive tackle would be really sweet. Like the Baylor guy, the big Baylor dude would be awesome. I think Brian Bresee is still on the Clemson D tackle, like a big dude. I would love to see something like that. I could absolutely see them going for an edge rusher of some kind. I'm not as familiar with the edge rushers, so I can't name names, but definitely don't be surprised to see an edge rusher sometime on day 3, even a running back sometime or on day 2, a running back sometime on day 2. The options open up a lot more when you're into the day 2 picks, and it's a lot more about who do we think can really be a contributor here, rather than what position do we need and what's the most important priority. Who the Vikings think that is, we kind of have to sit and wait and figure out. Also, there's like Kyle Blue Kelly. That's another corner I should probably mention. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting day. We could see trades. We could see not trades again. We could see him just stay at 87 and pick. I don't think anything would surprise me, except trading Daniil Hunter would surprise me. If they trade Daniil Hunter, I'll have to take the L on that. But I just don't see it. But kind of everything else is on the table. So we'll see exactly what Kwesi's got up his sleeve and what kind of players he's after. And we can kind of keep learning about what Kwesi's MO is in terms of the draft. There's another young player in Jordan Addison. A lot of young players last year as well. So that kind of youth angle seems to be kind of important to him. And so, some of these older guys like Hendon Hooker might not be as fun. Oh, and of course the quarterbacks, right? The day 2 quarterbacks. Will Levis still on the board? Who knows what happens there? For me, Hendon Hooker probably goes tomorrow. For me, Jaron Hall and Dorian Thompson-Robinson are also BYU and UCLA respectively are also day 2 quarterbacks. I know many people do not agree with me there. I think I might just be a little too high on those guys, but that's okay. That could be the pick at 87 as well. It's these guys that maybe, hey, can we develop them into something better? What's the deal with that? We can maybe get something there. So I will be back tomorrow morning to talk about whatever happens here on day 2, break down trades, break down players. We'll see what goes on. Until then, everybody enjoy the very cool USC receiver. Go look up his highlight tapes on YouTube. It's very cool. I will see you all tomorrow. And as always, Skull.